What if God, wanting to show his wrath and to make his power known, endured with much long suffering the vessels of wrath prepared for destruction, and that he might make known his riches of his glory on the vessels of mercy which he had prepared beforehand for glory? Romans chapter 9, verse 22 to 23. The Apostle Paul deals with the sovereignty of God in election, picturing God as the potter working with clay. These verses explain the vessels of wrath are contrasted with the vessels of mercy. One set is slated for destruction and the other for glory. Paul highlighted the need everyone has for God's righteousness and how God provided for humanity to have that righteousness by His grace through faith in Christ Jesus. He also describes the result of everyone who has received God's grace and provides evidence of God's trustworthiness in how He provides salvation to Jew and Gentiles. And he concluded in his letter by outlining the responsibilities of believers to live righteously. Paul mentions vessel of wrath prepared for destruction, reminding his readers that the story doesn't end happily for everyone. The question is whether God has the right to choose whom he will bless and how. If God is sovereign, then we should trust him as the one who knows how to deliver us, but not everyone will trust in him apparently. Paul explained that God has the right to have mercy on whom he will have mercy and the right to harden whom he will harden. Paul anticipates the question of how God can hold people accountable if ultimately he is making this kind of choices. The potter has the right to fashion from the clay whatever he wants. Clearly, God has that right with no restrictions. Some people have concluded that Paul is teaching a doctrine often called double election, that God chooses who will not be saved in the same way he chooses who will be saved. But like Paul said in 1 Corinthians chapter 4 verse 6, we should not go beyond what is written. We need to be careful about making inferences when a verse is not explicit. In the case of the vessel of wrath, Paul raises a hypothetical, a what if, to remind readers that God has the right to make such choices if he so desires. But God is merciful. His mercy is infinite, unlimited, and eternal. God's mercy is shed upon those who need it. God's mercy is illustrated in the parable of the ruler who was owed a great deal of money. The ruler ordered that money to be collected, but when the debtor came and begged for mercy, the ruler mercifully forgave the debt. The parable illustrates the debt of sin we owe to God, so great a debt that we could never repay it. But because God is merciful, He freely forgives us that debt in Christ. After having been forgiven the debt, the person who owed the money refuses to forgive someone else. The ruler then judged that ungrateful person for his lack of mercy. Paul points out that God is the maker, and he has the right to make people to serve his own purposes, and God endures the great patience even those people who are destined for destruction. But God, who is rich in mercy because of his great love with which he loved us, even when we were dead in trespasses, made us alive together with Christ. By grace you have been saved. Paul explains how God mercifully makes known the riches of his glory to all of those whom he calls to be in Christ. To God be the glory. God bless you.